I have one final DraftKings Millie Maker draft to do for NFL best ball season, and I couldn't think of a better person to bring on than Tom Strachan, the UK leader in best ball, the face of UK best ball, which in turn kind of makes you the face, one of the faces of DraftKings best ball. Tom Strachan joining me today from Fantasy Pros, from UK best ball, from you've seen him on Twitter doing all sorts of awesome stuff. We're going to talk through some strategy, kind of approach to these final couple weeks here in DraftKings best ball drafts. Then we're going to hop into a $5 Millie Maker draft on DraftKings. All right, guys, it's time. This is a bittersweet moment for me, Tom. So I've really enjoyed. I know people, like to get their shot in or whatever at the DraftKings app and the drafting experience. I have really enjoyed drafting on DraftKings over the summer, and so I have one final draft left in the Millie Maker. But I'm excited to be doing it with you. You said you have you have 60 or so left, but how is best ball season generally going, and are you excited for these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, man. I mean, like this is what we've been warming up for. It's been a long old slog. I was looking back at some drafts from February that I did right around kind of the Super Bowl time. I was getting Michael Pittman in the 6th round and stuff like that. So it was looking at all those values and how they've changed to now. I feel like I'm kind of at that point where I'm getting a little burnt out with it. It's like, as you kind of get to that point where you're filling up all your drafts, it's like, well, I feel like I've been here before. I've done this pattern, like particularly on the turns, it feels really easy to fall into builds that you've done several times. So I'm at the point now where it's like, right, okay, if I'm getting the 101, how am I going to make this draft different from not only my other drafts, but everyone else who's drafted and fallen into the same patterns?
I love the way you said that too, because it is definitely two-pronged, and it is easy to say, it is easy to kind of follow one of the prongs where, right, like you said, I'm in my world. I like these players at these spots, and I know how I can maybe be a little bit different for myself, right? We have the Lamar and Trey Lance jerseys in the background, right? I've been drafting plenty of those guys, certainly tons of Trey Lance. I can figure out how to create some different combinations with Trey Lance for my teams, but I also have to be cognizant of, okay, there's, especially in this contest we're about to enter with almost a million other teams into it, right? If my Trey Lance teams all have Brandon Ayuk or all have, we're doing the same things as every other Trey Lance drafter, even though it might be a little bit different for me. It's a really delicate balancing act. Is that something that you're kind of really hyper focused on these last couple weeks?
Yeah, and I felt particularly on DraftKings, it's getting harder to draft Trey Lance with Brandon Ayuk at the minute because like they've been squeezed up, and from the point where we were getting them at around the 9th, 10th, 11th round, not even a few weeks ago, now to the point where you're looking at taking them around the 7, 8, 6, 7 turns, kind of quite often. It's really difficult to go, all right, well, do I really need to push the builds that different on these just because even just by taking them, they're different to the ones I've already built? Or should I now, like early on in the draft season, I was picking up Jerron Jennings quite often in the 20th round. And now it's like, well, how many times should I sprinkle in Danny Gray as he's getting up camp hype and preseason hype? So, yeah, definitely. And then likewise, like Trey Lance and Lamar, they're my two highest owned quarterbacks. So every time I pick them up now, I'm pushing more towards zero RB builds around them because particularly in this contest with nearly 900,000 contestants and like a 900-person final or whatever it is, I feel like the extreme strategies can definitely work, and they're the ones I want to be in. Whereas earlier in the off season, there were times where you could build robust and you could pick Kamara up in the 3rd, and so like even just looking back at my own builds now, I know that I'm quite different to how I was a few weeks ago. But you can't just allow yourself to fall into ADP and just be like, okay, that player, and carry on like that.
Yeah, I love that. It is a weird dynamic on DraftKings. You mentioned the robust and zero running back, and I totally agree in terms of the extreme strategies. Not even just like when as it pertains to the early running backs, but all in all, I think the extreme stuff is really helpful. But it's weird on DraftKings. How have you kind of handled where you can't for a lot of the summer? I don't want to say quite as much right now because, like you mentioned, with the Brandon Ayuks of the world, but there was a long time where we could get, I mean, Brandon, like you said, Brandon Ayuk in the ninth, 10th round, and then there's the Chiefs receivers are super cheap, and there's all these guys. I always remember last year, I'm sure you remember, which this did not go well. But I like Will Fuller. I end with like 60% Will Fuller on DraftKings because he's going in like every time I keep taking him, and he keeps going. The next draft, he's going a round later. You know, he was like a 14th round pick by the end of the summer on DraftKings, and I couldn't stop taking him. And so there's that weird thing where it's like I know it's full PPR with the yardage bonuses, and like you said, I'm trying to beat a million other people, but if the field is going to give me certain things, at certain other positions. Have you kind of felt that too, and how have you been like approaching that?
Yeah, I mean, the Will Fuller stuff. I mean, I was smashing Will Fuller at the start of the offseason, and like when DraftKings launched, and he was in like the 13th, 14th round, and now he's kind of slipping into the 20th, and I'm like, ooh, it feels a little bit dangerous now to be taking him because I just assumed by the time the training camp rolled around, Will Fuller would be on a team, particularly one of these wide receiver needy teams like the Packers or my Ravens. But yeah, easing back off that. And then I think one thing on DraftKings that I really try to do is just to sweep up the value. When you see players fall, like earlier today, I got Kyler Murray in the 9th round, and I just had, you do a quick Google search to make sure that nothing's gone on. But it's like the value that is presented on DraftKings can definitely be a lot more than other places because the field does seem to be a little bit hit and miss with how smart the draft rooms are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And that has been where I'm taking fairly strong stands, especially like in this Millie Maker tournament. But I feel more confident kind of in that, like what you were talking about at the top, that I'm going to be able to cycle through some stuff just because, like you said, the draft rooms are kind of all over the place. Sometimes nothing really crazy happens, and sometimes Tom Brady goes at the 101, and like you said, and Kyler falls. It's so unpredictable, which is totally fine. But then in those scenarios, I have some guys on teams that I would never, because they do just fall. Like you said, random, like Kyler Murray is just never going to go in the 9th round really on any other site. And it's not like it happens a lot on DraftKings, but the time that it does, that's what really helps your 150 teams or whatever be stronger. And, if you're naturally diversifying and all those different things.
Well, like you got Christian McCaffrey in the 8th, 9th pick overall in the first round the other day. And as soon as you get a player in that situation, it opens up so many more ideas of, right, do I need to go extreme here? Or if I just build sensibly from this point on, am I already going to have a really different team that's completely different to the majority of the 800,000 teams out there?
Yeah, mine was just 100%. Mine was just as simple as that. It was like, well, I got Christian McCaffrey at like the 109. And then I was like, I'm going to take basically the highest ADP player the next couple of picks because they'll never be paired up with CMC. And I think it was like CeeDee Lamb and like Mike Williams or something. And then even I got somebody in the 4th round that was a decent value. It was like from that point on, like you said, I don't need to do anything crazy. Sometimes I am willing to do things a little bit more off the beaten path on DraftKings. But in that scenario, right, just being able to play the draft room on DraftKings is not a greater skill, but something I think we probably need to hone in on more just because there's so much higher variance.
Definitely. And like I was saying, those days where you could get Kamara in the 3rd round and start with 3 strong running backs, I knew that like my team would still be different to people who are going to fall by the wayside because I'm happy to build out like a 2-4-11-3 team with 11 wide receivers to make up for it. And I think, DraftKings gets a bad rap, but they've tried to put on a lot of different contests this year, and there's some interesting formats. And, the UI is still massively lacking, but it's a lot better than it was last year and a huge jump from 2 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, and I love all the different types of contests. I like that there is this big, prize that we can all chase for $1 million up top for just a $5, right? You don't even have to spend $1,000 and you get a shot for an entire season to shoot for $1 million. That's pretty fun. And then there's single entry tournaments, and some of the like. What I really like is this diverse kind of portfolio of number of people that make the finals and advancements and stuff. Some of the ones that are like, okay, you obviously have to get in your top 2 in every tournament to advance, but then there's like a 6-man second round, and and then the final is like 12 people or 20 people or something. I really enjoy that. Have you adjusted your strategy at all for those different tournaments?
I think like I'm focusing less on the correlations and stuff like that. The week 17, which I know that like you've done a ton of work on, and obviously when you taking on 889 people in a final, it's hugely different to taking on 12 people. I don't think that the stacks matter. I don't think week 17 correlation matters as much as just having a really good team. The one that's kind of flummoxed me a little bit has been the single entry contest. Like, I kind of get into those drafts and I'm like, I don't know what's important here, because each draft is such a microcosm across the time that the contest's running. And obviously the finals are smaller, so I've been less worried about stacks. But one of my favorite things to do being here in the UK is to jump into early morning drafts on a Saturday or a Sunday morning and pick up the auto drafters who've logged in drunk. And I think the one which I did for the $15 one, there was 6 people auto picking in it, which then presents a whole different world of other challenges. So.
Yeah, you have to map stuff out ahead, because you're like, look, I really like that these guys are drawing dead with the auto drafts, but I can't like value hunt too much, because they're gonna, I got to do the math in my head, like how many auto drafters are in between me and my next pick if I want this guy or whatever. Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting. We're going to have to switch roles right next year so that I can take it. I'm going to fly out to you came to the US to draft on Underdog. I'm going to fly out there for a weekend or something and just pile in a bunch of drafts, like you said, to take advantage of the idiot drunk Americans on the weekends. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this last weekend before all the games kick off. I feel primed, but if I get up at about 6 a.m. my time, which was 5 hours ahead of Eastern, then I should get a good few hours of really drunk drafters.
Yeah, exactly. So before we hop in, last thing, what has been, you mentioned Lamar and Trey Lance kind of as your 2 highest owned quarterbacks, but what has been kind of your biggest stands? Doesn't have to be necessarily players, could be, but just generally, like if you had to pinpoint 1 or 2 things that you've really been focused in on in drafts, what has it been so far?
Yeah, so I mean, in this $5 milli, it's been really hammering like either zero RB or hero RB. I feel like so many people are going to approach these drafts as a casual user with balanced builds. And so for me, I've ended up with a ton of guys like Nyheim Hines, Rachaad White, Khalil Herbert, and Kenny Gainwell. Like that's the area where I really want to pile into the running backs. And I haven't worried, like, generally, a lot of my drafts either fall into going 4 or 5 running backs total if I'm taking like a couple early on. But I don't mind if I'm going with a hero RB or zero RB falling into a balanced kind of 3-7-7-3, because I believe that the kind of the way that I'm constructing and taking my running backs will still leave me quite, not necessarily unique, but different to a large majority of the field.
Yeah, I like that. And there is something to be said for I think there's just a lot more you can do on DraftKings, like you mentioned, the 3-7-7-3. I think on other sites with not having 20 rounds, with not having some of the kind of chaos of the draft rooms, you can really back yourself into a corner, getting too thin at even seven wide receivers can be too thin at times. Even I do have 7 wide receiver teams on, say, Underdog, but it's tougher a lot of the times to have a really strong wide receiver room that you can get by with 7. And then if you were to take 3 quarterbacks or 3 tight ends or something also on that team, now maybe you're hurting at running back, right? And so it's just a difficult thing to do that I think we can take advantage of on DraftKings. This is really funny. Rob's already giving you shit for Trey Lance.
Who doesn't love a backup QB?
I know, right? That is perfect. So shall we go? We've been teasing the people too long. Let's go ahead and hop in to a draft. We hit enter and then I'll share my screen. All right, we are in. Oh no! If people are watching, they're going to be filling it up with us. So this is not going to be my best team. If it's all people that are tuned in that are going to end up filling this, and there's 9 of them or more. It could be the whole draft room. We're not going to get one of the super soft DraftKings rooms here. That's funny. Already bought the Lance jersey in anticipation of winning the tourney. Love that.
Big time. Double down after last year.
Yes. I mean, what might as well, right? It can't go worse is what I keep telling myself. That's what people keep saying. There's Najee talks in the 105. Okay, we got the 105. That's good. But that people keep saying that with like the Steelers, right? They're like, I like Najee, I like Deontay, et cetera, because it can't be worse than Big Ben. I'm like, you know what can't be worse is drafting a quarterback in the 7th round and he never play. He doesn't play the entire year.
I think one of my best teams last year was I didn't hit in any of the really big contests, but it was in the $3 DraftKings 20 max. And I made the top 100 of that out of like 116,000 or whatever. And I had a 4 running back build, and one of the guys was, I've forgotten the name, the guy who was on I think he was on the Falcons at one point last year and was being hyped up, and I think he was on practice squad the whole year. So, yeah, I don't care about losing the odd player.
Yes, exactly. What have been, we'll start here at the 105, which is in my opinion my favorite spot to pick. What have been your kind of preferences there when you get into this top 5? Are you just kind of playing whichever one of those top 5 guys are there, or do you have any kind of other hotter takes on the top of drafts?
Yeah, I think kind of the top 5 it plays itself quite nicely. I'm quite happy taking most of them. I mean, we've got a spicy start with Jamar Chaser, but I feel like it's after the top 5 where I kind of end up falling into different players and having more takes on them. But yeah, like Justin Jefferson, I've been mixing him up, taking him slightly ahead of Cooper Kupp the last couple of weeks. I've been CMC at the 101 for quite a bit of the offseason. Mm-hmm. But I also, if I get a run of number 1 picks, which seems to happen on DraftKings, I don't mind taking Jonathan Taylor just because it's so much less frequent that you get him.
Yep. So I am going to run down for you and for the people as we're about to. So, wow. Austin Eckler goes 4th overall. So here's your Kupp or Jefferson decision. Which one do you prefer? Because I don't have a preference, honestly.
I'd go Jefferson.
Okay, let's do it. So you can see I have 14% Kupp and 16% Jefferson. So basically just kind of been balancing it out. The nice thing is I was higher on Jefferson before. I think that it's really kind of just a coin flip, but like you, I kind of wanted to mix up the Jefferson stuff a little bit, and Kupp was just kind of always going in the top 3. And now that is not the case with some of the Stafford elbow concerns and just kind of some general Jefferson hype. And so it's been one of those things where, again, like we talked about drafting throughout the whole summer, is I'm getting Kupp at 5, 6, 7 sometimes, and that just never happened before. So it's just naturally balanced out kind of my exposure to those 2 players, which I like. It's kind of what I want.
Definitely. I think like a friend of mine at Fantasy Sports Lace, a guy called James, he did a lot of work with ADP, and he was looking through all the 100 DK milli drafts he'd done, and he found that there was a lot less Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins stacks than there were Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford because of the way the ADPs aligned. That when they had aligned, that there was a bit more reach on them. So I've been trying to hammer that a little bit in the last few weeks to try and make sure that I've got something. Because when I went back and looked at mine, I had a lot of Adam Thielen stacked with Kirk Cousins, but not that much Justin Jefferson.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So speaking of that, I was going to run down really quick so the people can see. I have our you see the Spike Week Draft Helper is ready and functional, and that's just kind of what you see here. So I have it customized for a couple of different specific options for me. I kind of like to keep it simple, but obviously you see the week 16 and week 17 games for anyone watching. So like Najee plays the Raiders and then the Ravens in week 16 and week 17, and then I have 3 percentages that I show for myself. And again, you can totally customize those. Everybody has different preferences, but mine is just my exposure to that player. So you see, I have 1%, 1% Joe.
Wow, that's quite a standard.
1% Joe Mixon, and then like 23% Saquon Barkley, but then the second number is my percentage with our first quarterback. So whoever, obviously it shows 0% right now because we don't have a quarterback yet, but once we pick up a quarterback, we'll be able to kind of see some correlations there. And then the third one is my exposure with our first overall pick. So these will be, I have 21% Justin Jefferson, and 21% of my Justin Jefferson teams are with who was that, Saquon. So just kind of seeing some of the correlations within my exposure and such as well. And then obviously if there's a correlation, you'll see it highlighted right in green. We don't have any other. Okay, I guess it takes a while to find another Viking, but once we run into another Viking, you'll see them as well. So just for people watching that maybe we're like, what the hell are those numbers and the colors and silly stuff?
What's your correlation with Aaron Jones? Because obviously that's the kind of Week 17 game, isn't it? Minnesota, Green Bay.
And see, that's an interesting one. I've been taking a little bit more Aaron Jones, and I'm interested in taking him here, but I felt like that was one that people would take when it was available to them, and I never have forced it. And I also haven't taken much Aaron Jones because I take so much of the wide receivers and tight ends and all of that right here. But I do like it, and I'm open to it.
I feel like a lot more people are Dalvin and Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones, given how the ADP's been lately. Yeah.
Would you side with him over, say, a CD here in that particular example, or would you take CD? You know, it's not a lot of value, but a little bit of value.
I'd probably be scooping the value on CD Lamb if he was there, but now, it's kind of that toss up between Aaron Jones, and then I feel like there's a little bit of you either go with Mark Andrews or it's a bit of a tier break.
See, this is actually a perfect example. I would take Aaron Jones here. And you can see that I've done 149 drafts, and this is a situation where I would absolutely be happy taking the Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones combination, and it just has never even fell to me this way. Like maybe Aaron Jones might have been there for me in that instance, but CD fell, or I actually like Saquon a lot more. I'll take Saquon at that spot, and so it's kind of funny that in my very last draft of 150, that this scenario that I'm totally not opposed to is kind of the first time it's played out for me.
And I think that's the way, definitely with Week 17 correlations, to really play him is if something like that falls to you, particularly where it's an unusual one. I really feel like there won't be that many of that duo out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it.
Maybe the start of the offseason when Aaron Jones he was third round at some of the FFPC drafts I've got.
Yeah, and the GA saw that I am fading Mark Andrews, which I don't want to say. I didn't want to bring it up into the Ravens game, but this is an Isaiah Likely show. Okay, yes. So we're taking we may or may not be talking about Isaiah Likely later in this. So that's where I stand on the Ravens tight ends.
Fun Police will be after you, though.
Yeah, yes, exactly. You're not allowed to be excited about Isaiah Likely having 8 for 100 and a touchdown in one half. Don't get excited.
He played like 15 snaps as well.
His yards per target or yards per route run or whatever was like triple of what Cooper Kupp did last year. Now we're talking. It's 2 preseason games, but the guy has 12 catches for like 150 yards and a touchdown on like 20 routes. All right, here's where it really starts to get tricky. What are you often doing kind of here in this range?
I'm slightly above T. Higgins, then Pittman, but I've also been trying to take more Kyle Pitts lately because I think I don't have enough. I was sitting at about 5%. So what about you? Where do you lean?
So Kyle Pitts is my guy here. I'm trying to take a pretty darn big stand on Kyle Pitts. So let's go that route. I do like. Also curious in your take on this. I really like what an elite tight end like a Kyle Pitts or Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce, etc., what it can give you on DraftKings. It's nice on say a site with 18 rounds, of course, but on DraftKings, when you get those extra 2 picks and you're freed up to only take 2 tight ends, it's just like this freeing experience where you can really you were talking about kind of being extreme. I feel like the elite tight end is what can lead to like really being comfortable you want to take 7 running backs, even if you took a 0 RB start. Take an elite tight end and it just sets you up for those kinds of things. What do you think about that?
Massively, and I think really the elite tight ends are even more important on DraftKings and other platforms. I mean, obviously FFBC is tight end premium, underdogs, half PPR, but here the 100-yard bonus, like the difference between elite tight ends and average tight ends is a gulf anyway. But then you throw in an extra 3 points on top of it for going over 100 yards, and it's massive. The weeks that you can get out of them, and we saw it with Mark Andrews last year down the stretch. It's just complete game changer.
Yeah, it's really true when you compare full point PPR. So the elite guys are just going to be able to have the 10, 12 target weeks, which that's an extra half point every time they catch the ball. And like you said, they can access 100-yard ceiling. So they already had a higher ceiling, but and I like Hunter Henry or whatever, those types of guys. The Hunter Henrys need to score like 3 touchdowns to even come sniff that guy, whereas on underdog, he can like hang in there with a 50 yards and a touchdown, but on DraftKings, there's just nothing he can do.
Definitely agree.
All right, we're about to be back on the clock, and we are on the clock. Jalen Waddle goes. Another interesting, I'll call it interesting range. What do you like here?
I've been leaning into Juju Smith-Schuster lately. He's one of those where I quite like Juju. I mean, it's hard not to like the Chiefs, and there's so many smart people who are on Juju that occasionally you have to be like a little humble and go, right, what am I missing? And when all these smart people start talking about him, dive back in. When Matt Harmon loves somebody, it's always worth taking another look at them.
Perfectly said. That's how I feel. And Juju's maybe one of the best examples of that, where we came into the offseason, and I mean, it's easy to see both the pro and con case for Juju, but when he was going in the 4th round or whatever, and he hasn't been good in quite a while. And I like Juju, like just generally speaking from a fan perspective, but you're like, well, there's 3 other guys on this offense, and we really don't know who is going to be kind of the leader, right? But we're excited about the Chiefs. I was kind of lazily just being like, well, I'm just going to take MVS and Sky and whatever. And then, like you said, it's like, well, if I really, really, really like the Chiefs, and I really like the Chiefs, and other people, like our smart people are like, I think we should buy Juju. There's no benefit in being super stubborn on that. You don't have to draft 30% of him, but I think it showed I have 8 or 9% Juju. It's like I can just take my 10% and move on,
Exactly. I mean, not every stand we need to take needs to be like in the 20-30%. It's just saying, all right, I didn't necessarily feel that way, but I want to be above market in case all these smart people are right, and then I look like the idiot. And particularly with Juju, it's easier because the range is in with Jerry Jeudy and Terry McLaurin. They're not wide receivers I'm massively enamored with either.
Yeah. All right, so there goes Lamar. So we weren't gonna get any Lamar with our Isaiah Likely stack. But Hollywood is probably my preference here, but also been trying to get some more Godwin. What have you been doing here?
I'm big on Godwin. I've got something like 19% Godwin, but I was drafting him when he was back in like the 8th round a lot. So, yeah. But I know you're a big Marquise Brown, and I do like him after years of defending him whilst he was at the Ravens. It's kind of like, if anything, I feel like things have flipped just slightly, and maybe he's a little bit being hyped up a little bit more than I think is necessary, because, you look at his role in the Ravens defense, he wasn't relied on constantly. Mark Andrews has taken a lot of weight off him, and I worry that the early season schedule when they play teams like the Rams and the Chiefs might be not quite the massive weeks people hope for, but I still think in this range where he's like wide receiver 22, 24 or so, he's definitely going to pay off on that ADP.
Definitely agree with both everything you said about Hollywood and what Fantasy Unleashed says here. The other big thing with Hollywood is I, like an idiot, was drafting him, in the 4th round or whatever, and then he goes and drives, 170 miles an hour on the highway and got hurt. And it was like, instant plummet from the 3-4 turn now to the 5-6 turn. And so I've been kind of just, this is a guy I like. I'm very much in on the Kyler thing is like a perfect example where I'm like, I'm in on this offense. Kyler falls. I don't really understand Kyler's ADP on DraftKings. Yeah. And so, but it's just been one of these things where Hollywood's falling and Kyler's falling. And I didn't intend on having, 30 to 40% of these guys, but the drafts just keep giving them to me.
Yeah, I'm a big fader of Cliff Kingsbury in general, but I'm a huge fan of Kyler. Yeah. And like earlier this offseason, the hate went too far. I mean, yeah, he had a bad playoff game, but he's still elite in fantasy. And, if I can take Kyler as QB, 6, 7 sometimes, it's like I take him over Joe Burrow all day.
Yep. Yeah, I just don't get it. Like, so, I mean, we're sitting at an ADP at almost 70 now, and he has and Look, you're talking. You have a Trey Lance jersey in your background, and probably no one has talked about Trey Lance over the last 2 years more than I have. No one is more of a fan than probably the two of us. But it is crazy that and like you said, he's going towards the Burrow range and towards the Russell Wilson, and like I like all those guys. I obviously love Lance, but it's just crazy to me that his profile is even available at that point in the draft now.
Definitely. And I think, and the one thing that's always nice is they have dome games as well down the stretch. So you're not worried about like this Buffalo Cincinnati game where it could be horrible weather. Like,
Yep.
The safety of the dome should at least keep plays up at a decent rate in those games.
And I've been screaming this from the mountaintops. I know people don't ever want to talk about defense and such. Here, there goes Bateman. Oh no, Bateman is best available here. Are you drafting Bateman?
Yeah. I'm drifting a lot of Bateman. Yeah, I think I'm
Good.
sort of like sitting around 17, 18%. But yeah, I mean, he just kind of falls. It's like, well, you see all these people who are saying, well, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards aren't going to be ready. Can you rely on Tyler Beatty and Mike Williams? Well, Mike
Davis.
Mike Davis. Well,
Yep.
if that's your argument, then you should be drafting Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews constantly because we could see something like last year. And I just think we don't really know quite what the Ravens want to be. Ever since Lamar got there, there's been differences every year. And this is the first year that things seem to be shaping up where things are healthy and we've got Rashad Bateman there. So, yeah, I like him to make a big leap this year. And I can't even remember what sort of positional value he's at the minute, but I've been smashing it.
I mean, again, he's another guy going a round and a half higher on some other sites, and I know kind of you hit on, we're hoping maybe they are a little bit pass heavier, but if they're efficient and they're at all even anywhere close to last year, right? It's kind of why I'm partially out on Mark Andrews is he's priced kind of like they're going to be still similar, a little bit more pass heavy, but then Bateman is going in the 6th round. And it's like, how does that make sense? If we think that they're going to be kind of, it's funny that Burrow is here now. All right. Now we're getting into this range that I kind of hate. I have a guy, maybe Devonta Smith is probably the guy I take here most of the time.
Devonta Smith's my 3rd highest owned wide receiver. I think, going back to the pod you did last week where you were talking about contingent value, he's, if AJ Brown gets nicked up, which we've seen time and time again,
every year,
it would be an absolute smash for a stretch of plays.
He could also we've like forgotten because there's this stigma. It's also funny on the Eagles, another perfect example, that people are worried about the pass volume and they're worried about Jalen Hurts, I guess, just generally speaking. But Devonta Smith, if we ignore that, which we're ignoring it for some other teams and I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent, but we're ignoring, Mark Andrews' pass volume concerns, and AJ Brown goes up in, the early 3rd round or whatever. Devonta Smith is a wide receiver that won the Heisman and was uncoverable, was the best wide receiver on the Alabama team that had Jerry Jeudy and had Jalen Waddle and had, Henry Ruggs, who, gone from our lives forever. But like, this dude could just be an absolute superstar and just needed that first year to kind of, get his feet wet. And we're treating him again. Like, why is he a 7? I don't really know why he's a 7th round pick. Like why do some of these other guys go in the 5th round and he goes in the 7th?
I think anyone who had BMI concerns or any of that bullshit about it by now truly has to be over it by now. Like, he showed that he's a real elite athlete. And whilst I look at Jalen Hurts and it's like, I don't think he's a great passer. I don't think that he's as good a runner as Lamar, and I don't think he's as fast as Kyler. Yeah. This offense is going to be a lot better. They've got a great O-line. Like, these are the kind of people that I want to buy in on.
Yeah, I love the O-line point too, because they are like maybe the best offensive line in the league, and now I have all these weapons, and you can have concerns about Hurts. You can have concerns about, pass volume and stuff, but no one has concerns that like the offense has a ceiling absolutely through the roof. They're not lacking for anything. They have decent running backs. They have at least a relatively young and exciting quarterback, however you want to phrase that, and 3 superstar pass game weapons. And so I just want to buy that,
You go back to the 2019 Ravens when Lamar was at his best. It was when Marshall Yanda was there and they had like multiple All-Pros that year. And the Eagles could easily do that this year.
All right, now we're getting into the range where the guys have gotten steamed up a little bit. Dameon Pierce, Chase Edmonds, the opposite, Antonio Gibson. Any strong preferences?
I mean, Antonio Gibson's definitely getting into the range where he becomes draftable again. I think
Yeah.
like I've got quite a lot of Chase Edmonds who's now been steamed up a bit. So yeah, for me, it'd probably be one of those two. I'd have a little less faith in Damian Pierce.
Yeah, same.
Like,
Let's do Edmonds. I don't have a ton of him, but like you said, he's getting into a range now here. We got him in the 90s where, yeah, it's Damian Pierce is a Texans running back, a rookie that like I like fine, but I feel like we're kind of doing going a little overboard with that. And then some running backs that it's a little kind of sketchy. One question I did want to get into before we kind of come back on the clock is we're looking pretty good, really, right? 5 strong wide receivers, good at running back, have Kyle Pitts. Quarterback can get tricky on DraftKings. How are you kind of thinking through just a general quarterback strategy?
generally, I want two before I get to Trevor Lawrence. I feel like after Trevor Lawrence is a real cliff edge. I like to have elite, and I'd say the vast majority of my build on here have the elite rusher, whether that's Trey
Yep.
Lance or TBC on whether he's elite or Lamar, Kyler. But if I'm in this range around here, I'll quite often just double tap quarterback quite quickly because
Mm-hmm.
it feels like after Kirk Cousins, there's a tier break, and then once you get past Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, you're really into we need at least 3 quarterbacks to.
I was gonna say, do you want to take Cousins to stack with Jefferson here? Because there's not a lot I love, and I know
Yeah.
he's not. I know he's not the highest
I mean,
ADP
that's
quarterback.
barely a reach, though, is it? We're talking 10 spots. Like, I
Yeah.
think given that we've not been reaching much or anything like that, that's perfectly fine in this spot. And even though there's Matt Stafford, Derek Carr, and Rodgers ahead, at this, I don't really care when it comes to stacks like this with a small reach of a round or so.
And it's different, I think, if we were taking him over kind of what I would call the elite tier, right? Like you mentioned, Trey Lance and the runners and the super elite guys. I'm not going to take one of these guys. But what really is the difference between Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, and Derek Carr? They're all pocket passers, right? In good offenses. But at that point, then I just want to rely on the correlation. It's like if we had drafted, I don't know, Alan Lazard or something and not Justin Jefferson, okay, let's take Rodgers. Or if we had Cooper Kupp, I mean, the perfect example is if we had Cooper Kupp instead of Justin Jefferson from the 105, you take Stafford. You don't take Kirk Cousins at that point. But I think they're all close enough that it's also possible one of them falls back to us, and if we do want to, double tap.
Yeah, definitely. And I think particularly with Kirk Cousins getting like the coaching upgrades around him, I mean, I really don't feel like he's going to get that much less yardage than any of that tier of Rodgers, Stafford, and Carr. And, if we do see lots of multiple wide receiver sets that are going to get more players like KJ Osborne and Irv Smith onto the field consistently, then we'll get those 300-yard bonuses much more often.
Yeah, totally agree. One question. Stafford, I guess we have one auto drafter, so he might not fall to it. But if he were, do you take any of like that falling quarterback like that we don't have any stacking options with and look to do like a Higbee or something like that?
Yeah, I think occasionally, I think with Stafford, it's one where it's like, okay, well, you can still pick up, I mean, just went before us, but yeah, you could have got Van Jefferson, Higbee, maybe take a speculative punt on Odell Beckham being back with the team later on in the season.
Yeah.
So yeah, occasionally, here I'd probably move away from that though, and we've got some nice running backs. I'd probably be leaning towards either Kenneth Walker for that late season charge if he recovers from the hernia, or James Cook.
Let's do Cook and see. We got Cook. Okay. I was once you said James Cook, I was like, okay, I don't have quite as much pressure to make sure I get this in since he's at the top. Since he's at the top of the queue. But this is an interesting running back range where you mentioned it at the top. I kind of live in this 10th through 14th round running back range. Like you said, like almost no matter what start I have. You start 0 running back, it's like I'm just hammering all these guys. Like you said, Nyheim Hines, Cook, Walker, Penny. We took Edmonds. I'm just drafting all of these guys kind of in this range. Gainwell, Rashad White. Like go look at my portfolio. It's just like my top highest owned running backs is like all of those guys because I love this range and we're set up so well with our wide receivers.
It just, you can round out a 4 running back build in this range. You can hammer this range in 0 RBs. There's just so many versatile backs.
So as we're coming up here, I do like the Hines. I do like the Hines play if he makes it back. Santorella already has 5 running backs, so please don't do it. Okay, there we go. I think Hines would be my favorite guy, but I'm also open if you have a
I
different...
mean, Hines is my most owned running back. I think he's one of those players that he gives you the benefit of, he's a hedge against Jonathan Taylor in some ways. I feel like it's an opinion which I might get cancelled for, but Jonathan Taylor isn't a great red zone running back. Like last year, he had a huge amount of touches in the red zone compared with how many touchdowns he actually got. And Hines seems to be a player that they're really loving in camp this year and could see even more opportunities on the field.
Hines is particularly on DraftKings, definitely one of my favorite backs, and he's gotten a little bit more pricier as the year has gone on, but it's rightfully so, and I don't think he's overpriced. I think people will look at, they do this too much, particularly with the pass catching backs like him. He had a really good year 2 years ago, and then last year he kind of fell behind JT. JT got a little bit more work, had an awkward fit with Carson Wentz, right? Went from Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz. Now we're kind of back to a much more Phillip Rivers-esque quarterback in Matt Ryan. And I think the team has let us know that, A, they want to get him involved more, period. They don't have a ton of playmakers, and he's one of them. So they want to use him a little bit more. They don't want to overextend Jonathan Taylor. And I think the sneaky thing that they've let us know is he might have some crazy contingent upside. I think people treat him a little bit more like James White. One, I think he would be the feature back if Jonathan Taylor went down. He wouldn't necessarily be Alexander Madison, but I think that they might just kind of shift their offense and he would be, the quote unquote feature back, more like an Aaron Jones when Aaron Jones is a feature back, or Austin Eckler type feature back. He's not playing every snap, but he's still kind of the feature of the backfield.
That's it. I mean, and you look at their running back room, and it's players like Tyson Williams at the minute. So I think Nyheim Hines' pass protection would keep him on the field enough that, definitely not on every down, but you could be paired with a veteran free agent, and you'd see a big amount of usage from him.
Yeah. So we're also super flexible here with one quarterback of Cousins and then 4 running backs: Aaron Jones, Chase Edmonds, James Cook, and Nyheim Hines. Which, man, you want to talk about pass catching backs? That is a list of pass catching backs on a PPR site, and then we have 5 really strong wide receivers. So we're in a spot where I'm really, really open to whatever we want to do.
I think there's plenty of options. I mean, obviously Irv Smith's coming up in ADP, so we could round out our tight end room. Or I'm not sure who's their quarterback, but also you've got Josh Palmer's someone I took. He's just gone off the board, but I've taken an awful lot of when he was further down.
Also, KJ Osborne, if we wanted to go to a wide receiver for the stack. I really did want Josh Palmer, to be honest. but we can settle. Do you have a preference on Osborne, Irv?
I'd probably go Osborne in this build because we've got Pitts, which is kind of much more central to what the team needs. Whereas, like, maybe if we'd only had one tight end in that TJ Hawkinson range, then I would have gone Irv to bump the stack up in value. But realistically, if Irv's getting in and playing a lot in this team, then something's gone wrong with Pitts.
yeah, exactly. Would this be a team that you're looking to round out with two more quarterbacks? If you only have Cousins so far,
I think if you can get one more quarterback, like I think Matt Ryan's the tier break here. Like if you get Matt Ryan paired with Nyheim Hines, it's an interesting stack, and then you can look at Alec Pierce and some of the other options later on. But after that, when you start getting into the Mac Jones and stuff, it's not that I dislike those players, but I just feel the need that I'm going to need possibly a third quarterback behind them.
I think the Matt Ryan, when paired with Nyheim Hines, is super interesting because if all goes according to plan for Matt Ryan and the Colts, he's probably not a big time fantasy quarterback. So I'm pretty interested in going him here. It's about at ADP. We're not in the typical DraftKings room, of course, because all these sickos in the chat joined us for our draft. But I'm down for Matt Ryan if you're open to that.
I think that's good, and then the bye weeks don't clash, do they? So I think that should be
week 7 and week 14.
Yeah, it's fine. So yeah, I think that's QB room sorted. Maybe looking for one more tight end, or if you punt that, taking 2 if necessary, really at the end. But I like the way this is shaping up as a team.
I really, really like this is something I kind of talked a little bit about last year that failed miserably with the Titans and Darrynton Evans, and it was something that Jacob Sanderson came on a couple of weeks ago with me and talked a little bit about this with, say, like a Tony Pollard, or I think it would work maybe with Rachaad White, guy you mentioned before, where you take the back who's it's a contingent play. He's a he has value. Nyheim Hines, like kind of we don't need to talk about that anymore. But if something happens to JT, Matt Ryan should theoretically get a boost too, because they're not just gonna give the next guy like Phillip Lindsay and Tyson Williams are not getting 25 carries. Like it's just not gonna happen. And so it's kind of simultaneously boosting Matt Ryan and probably someone else we draft later, Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, one of the tight ends, Ashton Doolin. You can really get crazy, later with the Colts guys, because they would all get huge value boosts from a Jonathan Taylor going down.
And particularly with the Colts, they're a good enough team with good enough pieces around that you can see it happening. If that happens with certain teams where the running back one goes down, I mean, things can just completely fall to pieces. But with the Colts, I'd still be confident.
Yep. So here, definitely kind of running back or wide receiver, don't have a super strong preference. I think if we do hit running back again, that might be kind of it for us, which, I think Aaron Jones, Chase Edmonds, Hines, et cetera, would be a pretty strong 5 running back team that would give us, if we did want to hit, an extra quarterback would be interesting too.
Yeah, I think at tight end, I like both Gerald Everett and David Njoku. I think that Njoku's ADP, I mean, he was going at 112 and he's dropped, and I don't feel like Jacoby Brissett's really that bad for his value. I would take Gerald Everett as well because I just want pieces of that Chargers passing attack. But yeah,
I really like the Njoku call. What do you think about him with a Pitts, where it's not that we don't care about, we want him to have a good season, but theoretically we're kind of banking on Pitts for most weeks anyway. And then Deshaun Watson comes back for the most crucial time of the season with Njoku, and now we have a potential monster on our hands. Like we should be dominating tight end with Njoku and Pitts during the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even Njoku's value over the 11-game ban, we've seen Jacoby Brissett just pepper people near to the line of scrimmage, and Njoku could go through games where he picks up 6-7 catches or so simply because he's going to be a reliable pair of hands. And outside of him, there's David Bell, who's a rookie, and, you can never count too much rookies at that level. But also, Amari Cooper's splits are absolutely woeful in cold weather games and, outside. So I really think David Njoku could be one of the most reliable pass catchers in that team.
Would you be surprised if he's, I'm not saying he's going to catch the most balls. You would project a wide receiver for that. But if he's the best fantasy asset in the passing game, would you be surprised at all?
Not at all, no.
All right, here's we got a green lighting up the screen here that I'm pretty excited for if it works out.
I think definitely that's got to be the pick, and I think now because we're kind of well set at quarterback, we're kind of well set at tight end, but now we can just keep smashing wide receivers unless a running back falls into place.
I love Alec Pierce. I wish I could retroactively, honestly, go back and get even more Alec Pierce. As we've seen the evolution of all these guys, these rookies and stuff get steamed up. The George Pickens, and I mean even Isaiah Pacheco is going really high now, right? It's Romeo Dobbs. These guys getting steamed like crazy, and then we have this guy that went at the beginning of the second round on a team that, I mean, we all like Michael Pittman, but there's not exactly target competition in Indy. He's been playing with the ones since day one of training camp, and he's got a pretty fun profile for best ball, right? He's kind of not a total target hog, but he's he's a really good down the field deep ball fade touchdown scorer. And I'm just like, why is this guy continuing to go in the 170s while everybody else is getting steamed up to the pick 100 or whatever?
Exactly, and it feels like we got a little bit of a dip when there were positive reports about Paris Campbell being ahead of him at one point, but then now it seems to have switched. And I mean, we're really counting on Paris Campbell to stay healthy. I don't like to get into the habit of trying to predict injuries, but it's after a certain amount of seasons, it feels like, if the team truly believed in Paris Campbell, would they necessarily be trying to draft young wide receivers? Yeah, maybe, but it's I'm not in on Paris Campbell.
I haven't drafted much Paris Campbell either, and maybe this will be the time where it finally hits me, because I have drafted him for a few years. Not super crazy, but I also think we're still living off a lot of hype from multiple years ago that I'm not even sure that it's warranted in terms of his like true raw upside, right? Pittman is there, a second round rookie is there on a run first team. They have JT and they have Hines. They have some tight ends that I kind of like. Mo Alley Cox is pretty good. I'm a Kylan Granson fan as well. I don't see, I could, again, be totally wrong. I don't see Paris Campbell as this, like, oh, yeah, I'm really excited. Like, it's a smash. I got a huge edge on my competition just because I have Paris Campbell.
No, and I totally get that. I think it's very hard to kind of imagine what his ceiling is. And yeah, but I do think the Colts in that division are going to be a fun team this year. And definitely getting a nice little stack like this that we've got so far works very nicely.
Who are you kind of looking at then here in later rounds? We obviously need at least another running back probably, but we're really freed up. Don't really need a tight end, but this is kind of the range where it's like pick your favorite players. And so who do you generally look for here?
Yeah, I mean, I found myself picking up an awful lot of the Jacksonville and Houston players simply because it's like that stack. I think you were talking about this last week on a pod. Like, there's so much potential for that to be really overlooked and score a lot of points because it's just two inadequate teams when it comes to defense, really. Maybe the Jaguars' defense is better than expected. But I've been taking flies on Jameson Crowder lately with his ADP having dipped because even if Isaiah McKenzie is, having a breakout year that wasn't particularly predicted, Jameson Crowder is going to get on the field. They're going to use him. He's a very reliable player. And I think like in this range, he's a lot more reliable than some.
Yeah. And I mean, just the sheer fact of being on the Bills is probably better than, like we just talked about with Paris Campbell. Like, I guess Paris Campbell has a better shot at getting more snaps to start the year, but I don't know that we can say Paris Campbell is better than Jamison Crowder. And I've been a McKenzie guy. I'm not really a Jamison Crowder guy, but we have reached this point now where we're talking about 17th, 18th round for Jamison Crowder on a full PPR site. Like, I mean, McKenzie could just get hurt and Crowder, or they could split snaps or, there's tons of different paths for that kind of thing to work out.
Yeah, and similarly, I was all in on McKenzie when I could get him in the 18th, 19th, 20th round. There's that nice Bills correlation with Bengals stacks. But now it's like, well, taking the cheaper option when it's a good player like Jameson Crowder. Jameson Crowder's not dust yet. I feel like he should be able to give us something through the season.
Yeah, so this is also where things get a little hairy. Like you start scrolling down this list, and there's not a lot that jumps out to me. So is there anybody that you've just kind of been, whether at the top of this list or further down the ADP list? Because I'm not super worried about ADP either.
So where we are, which round we in? We're so like
17.
17th. Yes, it's kind of the round where like I try to be scrolling down a fair bit. So if it lines up, Curtis Samuel's someone I think might be being slightly undervalued. He'd give us a little correlation for.
I love that
the Njoku thing. Like Curtis Samuel was my boy a couple of years ago. When the first year of DraftKings at Best Ball, I had like 50% Curtis Samuel. And that was a year where he was being used out of the backfield in Carolina, and I really think that. Washington's offense on the whole is being slept on a little bit. I know Carson Wentz there, but they've got an okay O-line, and I think that there's a lot of interesting pieces, and there's games where they can stay in touch. And if Curtis Samuel's healthy, then he could be his skill set is different to everyone else's on the team.
I like that, and just kind of I know, again, like you said, Wentz is an issue, but kind of a like rising tide lifts all boats. Like Terry McLaurin is a good football player. Jahan Dotson is also the guy that we can't make it a day without somebody at camp saying like, no, this dude might just be the best player on this team, which is kind of unexpected, but it is what it is. Antonio Gibson is a guy we all like and they still like, but they also then added Brian Robinson. JD McKissick is still there. Logan Thomas, they have some tight ends that are interesting. Like you said, a good offensive line. It's like, I know Wentz is not good. But Wentz is not. I'm trying to think of like Wentz is not Brandon Allen. Like he did the Colts kind of won somewhat in spite of him, but also he was still able to get the ball to some guys. Like he's a below average NFL quarterback, but he's not like it's not like he shouldn't be in the NFL. He's not that bad. And so if the talent is really there, like you said, an explosive weapon like Curtis Samuel going in the 17th and 18th round, I don't have a ton, but he's probably one of the guys where I'm like, damn it. I wish, I was taking McKenzie. You mentioned the Jags and Texans. I have like a shitload of Zay Jones because of kind of the premise thing that you talked about. But Samuel's probably one guy that has sort of fallen through the cracks for me, but just from a talent perspective, I wish he hadn't.
Yeah, and there were sort of injury issues to start camp and OTAs and stuff. And I think if that hadn't have been there after he basically missed the entirety of last season, then maybe he would have got steamed up a little bit, or people would have been on him a little more. But he's definitely someone now at this point in the season I'm trying to just just bump up the percentages a few points over my last drafts.
Yep, definitely. And that's something this is my 150th, so I'm done in this tournament, but something I'm trying to do in general over these last couple of weeks, like you said, that spot those guys where it's like, I mean, I like that. I'm like, I like that guy. There's no reason. It's not like someone who I was actively trying not to draft, right? Like I don't draft Devontae Parker and AJ Green and stuff. Those are just not my guys. So I don't give a shit if I boost their percentage, up a little bit. But the guys who I'm like, damn it, I have 4% of that guy and it was not planned. Like I did not intend to have 4% of somebody. Then those are the guys I'm kind of trying to mix through. And the other thing, as we get to 18th, 19th, 20th round, is kind of mixing through guys that I hadn't been taking a lot of. One I wanted to kind of did he just go? Yes, I was going to say Zach Moss. So now I don't now I just wasted all that time. I do like Dearnest for a fifth running back for us.
Yeah. What do you think? Gives us a little correlation for the Cleveland and Washington one we're building out. But yeah, I've got a lot of Dearness Johnson, and he kind of jumped a little bit, but then fell off again. And I still think, there's a path that Kareem Hunt gets traded. If the Browns are really out of it by the time the trade deadline comes around, and then Dearness Johnson becomes big down the stretch.
Yep, and or like they keep Hunt, they decide they want to keep Hunt and go for it and trade Dearness, because every time Jerome Ford takes the field, he looks like a freaking superstar. And what are they going to do? Make him inactive on game days? I just can't envision a scenario in which something doesn't happen in that backfield. I could be totally wrong, and like you said, it may not happen before the season starts, but it's really hard for me to envision, given the fact that they appear to have 4 really high level running backs and what they're dealing with Watson, Brissett and stuff. Like they could be losing a lot of games early and just be like, why would we hold on to both of these running backs when they're going to be gone? They're both probably going to be gone next year.
No, completely. And Dearness Johnson's contract's so affordable as a restricted free agent. It's very easy to move that for peanuts, really.
Yep. So I would mention David Bell, but I don't think we need to draft any more Browns. Anybody else that have been kind of your super deep punts? We have 2 picks left and can kind of do whatever we want.
I mean, Isaiah Likely was someone that I'd picked up a lot of when I went Lamar Bateman. So I've got a lot of him. I've got a lot of James Prochet, Chris Evans, Randall Cobb, someone who's probably been slightly undervalued. But, I mean,
Cobb is somewhat interesting.
Yeah, I think, go a little further. There's players like Terrace Marshall and Rashard Higgins, who I feel like...
Okay. Let me load up the queue now. We went with Chris Evans just as a tiebreaker for.
But then there was a report today that Terrace Marshall might be running out of time, so perhaps not.
We'll put him in there and then load up some more wide receivers.
I think we've got. Sorry, go.
I was just going to say R.I.P. to Tyquan. I was taking a little bit of Tyquan, and that one's frustrating.
Yeah. I think Daniel Bellinger, the tight end for the Giants, is someone who's interesting because we've kind of got a little bit of Giants correlation in there with Indy as well. So he's somebody that you could picture a rookie coming on right by the end of the season. He's not somebody we're going to rely on massively, but I can't imagine him being heavily owned in the finals.
Did Likely go? Yeah, of course he did.
I
was just going to say, I'm wondering what... Yeah, so pick 199. I remember the days. I remember all the days of just waiting until the 20th round to take Isaiah Likely and just like not even ever thinking about anyone else taking him. And now you have to decide like how early do I take him when I want to take him.
I think I'm at like 12% unlikely in this contest, so it's I'll probably just not take too much more for the rest of it.
Yeah. He's just one that Bellinger is a great point. Like those guys, I wanted to mix through all of those guys. Bellinger, Trey McBride, Isaiah Likely, Dolchich, all of those guys. Of course, the Likely thief is in is in the chat. Shout out to you though, Phil. You're talking to two likely fans, that's for sure. And obviously Tom is a likely fan as a Raven, and what an exciting time to be. I mean, good Lord, Mark Andrews is good. If you got another dude that can play like that at tight end, that's crazy.
I mean, yeah, being a Ravens fan, it's kind of lucky. The team's never going to be truly awful in a lot of ways. It's a well-run team. People panic, but the Ravens just do things in different ways. So, yeah, I don't sweat it. It's blessed.
Yes, quite blessed. All right. I put a couple of guys in the queue at wide receiver. It's really, really gross. We also don't have to take a wide receiver. We have 9 really good ones. If we wanted to hit tight end or quarterback, there's probably not a quarterback left. Not particularly. I'm open. Yeah. I'm open. If you wanted to do Bellinger, or I put Khalil Shakir in there, which would be kind of a
yeah, go Khalil Shakir. That's probably more upside than Bellinger, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just kind of like theoretically, it's probably not. And now every time I say the word likely, it like I can't like say it seriously or without like tripping myself up. But it's probably not likely that Jamison Crowder and Khalil Shakir kind of come through together, right? But I think there's something like in a 20-round PPR draft, if you take those two guys and hit on one, it's like you don't need. This isn't DFS. I don't need every one of my roster spots to absolutely hit, especially when one of them's a 20th round pick. It's like if you spend 2 of your last picks on 2, and they're Bills wide receivers, who's to say they don't have weeks throughout the course of the year? And it's just if you get to week 17 and one of those guys is starting, like that's a huge win. Like that was a huge win from 2 picks in your last 4 picks or whatever.
But it's also that kind of like idea of going, all right, well, if one of these guys goes off in week 16 and gets me to the final, but then, Jamison Crowder comes back after being out of the previous game and then he goes off. How many Crowder teams made it to the final? How many Crowder teams went out the week before? Do I have a unique lineup because of that? So, yeah, I think it's an interesting pairing.
And I think Crowder is probably just like a McKenzie replacement. I think Crowder is pretty much proven to just be a slot receiver, which is totally fine at this point. And I think McKenzie's pretty much just a slot receiver. But I think Shakir is the guy that they're keeping like, I don't totally hate like the Isaiah Hodgins and stuff of the world, but I think if something happens to Gabe or Diggs, I think Shakir is the next man up out there. Even though he's a little bit typecast as a slot receiver, I think he would get a shot out there on the outside. So let's run down the team. We got blessed with the Tom is blessed as a Ravens fan, and we got blessed with the 105, like maybe the best spot to pick, and we got blessed with Justin Jefferson being available at the 105. Then I'm kind of surprised that it happened. Aaron Jones is there and sets up the instant little fun correlation, and I do like Aaron Jones a good clip more on DraftKings probably than some other sites, and went with little 2-6-10-2 build, super duper strong at wide receiver in my position. And then we have a Kyle Pitts anchor at tight end, stacked Kirk Cousins with Justin Jefferson, and came back and got a little fun backdoor Colts stack with Matt Ryan, Nyheim Hines, and Alec Pierce. Pretty fun team. These are like also all my kinds of wide receivers: Justin Jefferson, Juju, Hollywood, Bateman, Devonta Smith, KJ Osborne as a part of the stack, Alec Pierce, right? And then we hit some Bills, Curtis Samuel. Pretty fun team. What are you thinking, Tom?
I think, yeah, it's like you say, there's a lot of fun wide receivers in there as well, which is just always nice when you draft a team. And it's like, there's actual fun players in there. There's players who are going to see either high volume, people like Jefferson, Juju, even Bateman, you can throw into that category, or you've got the players like Marquise Brown, who can absolutely blow a game open. KJ Osborne had a really impressive amount of touchdowns and like over 600 yards or so last year in kind of his breakout season. David Njoku, we talked about, yeah, he could accumulate volume that might make up for if Kyle Pitts has a down game and is marked out of the games and stuff. And then the interesting kind of shots towards the end of it on Curtis Samuel, who, if he bounces back and has usage like he was 2 years ago when he was in Carolina, I mean, Washington have paid him a lot of money, so if we do make use of him, then it could be really good for us. And then Chris Evans gives us that nice little Week 17 correlation with the interesting Bills, sort of like auxiliary pieces that we've got.
I like the little interesting, like you said, ancillary pieces on those two teams, especially because all the main core pieces, it's obviously outside of like the Tyler Boyd and such, but having James Cook and kind of some late stabs, it's like if you're on the Bills and you're on the Bengals at getting on the field at that point in the season, like you have monster upside. And so that's how I like, we talked about week 17 and all of that. That's how I like kind of attacking some of those games. Like you don't have to have Jamar Chase or Stephon Diggs or Gabriel Davis or Josh Allen to still get your pieces of really good offenses and really good week 17 games. And then we have plenty of other correlations and stacks, right? We have the Minnesota and Green Bay game stacked up. We have a fun little Jonathan, nobody's wishing anything bad on Jonathan Taylor, but if something bad happens to Jonathan Taylor, it's a really fun team. And honestly, this is a little different team than I usually build. So I'm really happy to have you on again for my last team. A little bit of a unique team for me.
No, I think 2-6-10-2 is something I'm not sure how many times I've done that build, but I'll definitely take a look afterwards. But yeah, absolute pleasure to kind of be here to round out 150. I mean, you must feel kind of relieved in some ways where it's like, that's that one done, time to just ease back.
It is a big relief. I mean, it's like, I know I still have a lot more drafts to do, but I will say there's something about like having that one tournament done. It's like, it hasn't changed the amount of drafts I have left to do, but like knowing that one's gone, it's not going to show up in my app anymore, because I maxed it and like, don't ever have to think about that one. There's something about mentally freeing about that for sure.
Definitely.
So Tom, you got to tell the people, I know you're doing DFS work. You obviously have tons of different best ball stuff. Where can the people check out the stuff you're doing, and both for the rest of best ball season and then I know in season as well?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest place to find me is on Twitter at NFL_TStrack, and you can find my work on Fantasy Pros, where I've been doing a ton of best ball content for them this year, writing their best ball draft guide. And you can find a lot of other redraft content as well as some just general NFL-based stuff around the preseason. I will be doing in-season best DFS content, but I'm just waiting on little details to get signed before I can kind of talk about where. But you can also find my website, which is nflbestball.co.uk, where I link to all my articles and other stuff wherever I'm appearing. And there's a bit of strategy stuff on there, along with some leagues that I run for people like me in the UK who aren't blessed with as many options as everyone in the US.
And hopefully we can solve that at some point, or you're just going to have to fly out here, I guess, every year. You started a new tradition this summer.
Yeah, good people of Underdog seem to be amenable to that. So I'm quite happy for little trips to New York every year to cram in as many drafts as I can do.
Yep, but it's nice, honestly, as a person who's very clearly excited about the best ball space, but also a big proponent of just general growth and everything, to have you out there like really being kind of holding the flag and leading the charge in the UK. I know we have some people in Canada and stuff too, where their options and different things are limited, but hopefully we can tackle some of that over the years and keep growing the game. At least you do have DraftKings. There's quite a few different contest offerings for you to take your toes in.
I mean, and I was saying yesterday on Twitter, between you and Best Ball Mania and the DraftKings Millie together, and there's been like over 900,000 entries already this summer. It's mad. Best Ball's taken over.
It is absolutely crazy. And maybe, I know DraftKings has a ton of in-season tournaments as well. Might have to have you back. We can do some in-season stuff, because I do DFS work and everything in season as well. And so I feel like it's a perfect breeding ground for the both of us, since we're so heavy into the regular best ball streets and then the DFS streets and everything. So might have to have Tom back. For myself, we will be back every single day this week. We only got a couple of weeks left to get all of our teams in, so we'll be doing plenty of drafting here at Spike Week. Make sure to go to spikeweek.com if you want to get the draft overlays that you saw on the stream today. If you want to get access to Draft IQ, so you can dive into some of your portfolio stuff and all sorts of other goodies, spikeweek.com/go premium. And for myself and for Tom, and for the first time ever, Tom, I need to bring you on just because my dogs didn't bark.
Yes, I hadn't even noticed. Yeah,
they're passed the hell out. So apparently you have a calming, relaxing a presence about you to keep my dogs from rallying up during the stream. But thank you for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back here on this channel. See you guys later.